And just to, end with the Q-Shaman for now, I just want to point listeners to an article that's going to be in the show notes that comes from next week's guest, who is going to be speaking to us as a professional anthropologist, Susanna Crockford, also a religious studies scholar who spent a year in Sedona or more writing a book about New Age spirituality. And she has a lot to say about channelers, especially the QAnon type. And she wrote a great piece for Religious Dispatches that I'll just quote from here. She writes, in the hour-long podcast episode that Chansley appears on. Now, one thing that isn't clear yet is that he's left a substantial body of work behind him. There's a library of Q-Shaman materials under various names. In this podcast episode, he goes by the name of Yellowstone Wolf. And the episode or the podcast is with a UFO disclosure type promoter. And he discusses his self-published book, which is written under yet another name, which is Lone Wolf, and his experiences with extraterrestrials and UFOs, psychedelic use and the purpose of meditation and raising consciousness. He goes through the gamut of New Age themes, fractal energy, frequencies, solar cycles, personal ascension leading to galactic ascension, chakras, the universe, light codes, overcoming negative emotion, 100th Monkey Collective, the flower of life and sacred geometry, the divine is within, be your own guru, astrology, and so on. He advertises his now defunct website, Starseed Academy MySpace, and promotes life wave patches and multi-level marketing scheme that he claims cured his father of cancer and liver disease. So we have this amazing archetype of basically every influence and possible sort of mechanism of self-promotion and self-examination all collapsing into one figure here. And I think he's going to provide a lot of insight as this kind of, as I said, the psychedelic tip of the spear for QAnon and conspirituality. And also, like, reading this paragraph, what occurred to me was how flexible and nimble this spirituality is, that with all of these influences, this is not a person who can really become an apostate. And that's what makes it particularly jarring to hear him get reamed out by Alex Jones, because, somehow I think this is somebody who's used to, whenever he encounters resistance, he'll say, oh, well, according to chakra theory or according to this brand of turmeric or whatever, this question can be answered. And so it's almost like I see him bringing a generative approach to New Age spirituality, where Alex Jones wants to basically have the entire buffet, but pick and choose according to who's in power and who isn't.
Reading that quote, what jumped out at me when I was studying religion in college, there are a few books that I read because I was very pulled into the theory of everything idea. And I read 2 books by Helena Blavatsky, and I read a book by Manly P. Hall. And listening to that paragraph, this is straight up from theosophy.
Right. So it's recombinant, it's buffet style. How can you actually stray? But also, how could you measure success in your spiritual path? It's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I talked about this week on Instagram. Reality always calls your bluff. So I think with so many of these more cultish, prophetic kind of groups, if the ideology is extrapolating itself into the outside world in terms of making predictions about the world or making claims that are testable, well, reality will call your bluff at some point, and hence the nimbleness that I think you're identifying here, right? That you got to keep pivoting and morphing.